This is the definition of chaotic good.
In here, it's Friday.
Bryan Cranston is selling you a vision of a life lived on Friday.
It's Friday!
Where the walls are covered with the most random crap you can imagine, botanists are in heaven, and servers are dressed in stripes like they escaped from the gangs of New York. How did restaurants get so boring? We went from insane aunt to beige robot, from pictures and lamps and brass to millennial Airbnb with a passion for graphic design. I mean, seriously, did Dwight Schrute design this?
This is more professional.
What went wrong? It's not just Fridays, Chili's, Applebee's. They were all blessed messes. And now they are all the same dull beige. Why is the only decoration planned for Applebee's an IHOP? The man who partied here? Well, now he just gets takeout. I found a story that goes back 100 years, and I learned how restaurants got this personality in the first place, because I think that's key to understand why they lost it. You have to learn about intimidating hot people. So you're giving me an idea of the vibe.
I was a scared little rabbit. These girls scared me, the guys scared me.
And a vibrant social scene. I don't know, should we explain why you're dressed this way?
Single and ready to mingle.
And when you do, you will look at these chains, old and new, in an entirely new way. This is a bar, circa 1950. It's smoky, cramped, and dark, without a lot of windows. Bars were kind of uninviting from the outside and closed off in the inside. So how did it become more inviting? To women, to families, in just a span of a few decades. It will all make sense, and so will the Ferns. In addition to the closed-off bar, in the 50s and 60s, you had a mid-century modern design vocabulary. Look at Howard Johnson's. Notice the orderly appearance, the modern-looking lamps in this postcard, or check out the bright colors in the Mad Men recreation of it. So the bars, they were dark, and the emerging chains, they were mid-century sleek. The baby boomers wanted to rebel. I know, you want your Office Space clips.
We need to talk about your flair.
But to explain why these restaurants look like an antique store vomited on a wall, you have to start with the antiques. This is the new template that emerged. Sweet and fun drinks, Tiffany lamps, and walls stuffed with ephemera. But it didn't start as the chain that we know today. In the 1960s, the nation's love affair with the 1890s reached critical mass. People depicted this as a fun, carefree, and creative decade with a lot of interesting design vocabulary that you just didn't see in the mid-century 50s and 60s. Now, it's important to emphasize this was not like rigorous history. This was history via vibe. So a lot of it was shaped by nostalgia for the gay 90s as depicted by a certain 1920s book with clutter, detail, and everything else non-mid-century. And seriously, once you adopt the 1890s as the lens to understand all these chains, you cannot unsee it. It's easiest to see the quirky names. Applebee's was originally TJ Applebee's RX for edibles and elixirs. Other chains like Orville Bean's Flying Machine and Fix-It Shop played on a similar historical theme.
Your father's mustache. So let's have a pleasant...
Though the Banjo Band and many restaurant chain Your Father's Mustache was probably more 1920s than 1890s, it was all an historical jumble of quirkiness to tickle the imagination. Why have an ice cream shop when you could have an ice cream parlor, or even old-fashioned hamburgers in a Victorian slab serif font? And these weren't just names, it affected the interior design of so many restaurants. It starts with these Tiffany lamps, artisanal-looking things that were mass-produced. Tiffany lamps were one manifestation of the Art Nouveau revival in the 1960s. Houlihan's was even called Houlihan's Old Place and used Art Nouveau marketing. This style was a type of rebellion against the mid-century modern elegance that boomers probably thought was cheesy. You could find Tiffany lamps in the early 1960s at Serendipity 3 in New York, but it was the beginning of a wider explosion. That is why you see them in Fridays, in Applebee's, in Wendy's, and in the movies that parody these chain restaurants.
Boy, I tell you, some days.
A little while to cook. Yeah, well, you give me some more ketchup.
But that design element is only half of the picture. We need to talk about the big social change that happened. And we need to talk about the Ferns. Mate seekers meet at Singles Bar. Of the early chain restaurants, only TGI Fridays in New York was explicitly a singles bar. This was the type of bar you saw in the Singles Bar movie and book, Looking for Mr. Goodbar. It took a West Coast infusion of Fern to transform the chain's purpose and design. I spoke to Meryl Schindler, who wrote one of the first surveys of Fern bars in San Francisco. We are very close to the 50th anniversary of this article.
Which is amazing because I'm only 35. I don't understand how
How did that happen?
The Fern Bar was a phenomenon. I think it still exists, but it's evolved into other forms.
I also talked to Martin Kate. He's a bar owner and bartender who has lectured about the Fern Bar's historic impact.
Well, when I used to do this for talks, I'd always do it in costume because it's just more fun to kind of get the audience into it.
When you would talk to people about this, how did you usually start it?
People don't understand really what a revolution these places were, particularly for women, to have a place that felt more comfortable, safer, and what a revolution it was at the same time with the arrival of the pill. It was really a huge cultural shift.
Yuppies before yuppies kind of was the clientele.
It was pre-yuppie, though I think yuppie certainly evolved at the same time, possibly out of the Fern Bar, or at least the Fern Bar is a place for the yuppie to go.
You're out in the Bay Area, and you mentioned to me that there are some San Francisco bars that are just really iconic when it comes to this, and they kind of establish this as a thing.
So when we talk about the Fern Bar, we want to talk about it as a genesis of really two movements. So there's the gay 90s revival, which is best typified in Alan Stillman's bar in 1965, which was TGI Fridays in Manhattan, his first place. But also at the same time, out here in San Francisco, Perry's, which is still around and has multiple locations. Then the second side is the ecology movement side. But there's all kinds of books of that era, how to talk to your plants and ways to, bring nature inside. And out here, that was really exemplified by the restaurant called the Trident. And so that kind of mixture of the ecology movement and the gay 90s is where you get the Fern Bar. That's where it kind of all comes together.
And so then out of this kind of movement, it seems like Henry Africa's rises as the iconic bar.
Henry Africa's is really the genesis where these two things come together. The unholy love child, as I called it, of the ecology movement and the 90s revival.
It was a place that intimidated me.
And that's where Norman Hobday, aka Henry Africa, founded this spot and really tied it all together. Brought the plants in, brought the Victorian furniture in, made it feel like grandma's living room, comfortable, safe, secure, and big windows.
I guess they put up the ferns to keep the bright light out of the windows. If you've ever grown ferns, they're pretty labor intensive and they look lousy as they die, which they do very quickly. But they put up ferns to keep the light out, the bright light, so people were a little flattering. And suddenly you could sit at a bar and you could see things.
Henry's space feels immediately inviting, and it feels comforting, and it's also the kind of place where you don't have to feel weird about ordering a mixed drink. It's not like a normal dive bar where you would never walk in and say, "Can I have a slow, comfortable screw or something?" One of these crazy 70s drinks. These places never batted an eye at the concept of a mixed drink.
You could see people. You could see your drink, and the drinks went from shots and beers to kind of frowsy, blousy drinks, exotic things.
Henry Africa's became an absolute sensation in San Francisco, and it ran for many years. It closed up shop in 82 or 83.
This article is kind of interesting because he says, I took the opium den atmosphere out of the saloons by bringing in antique lamps from grandma's living room and antique furniture. It was like writing a bestseller, which seems like totally right to me, right? I mean,
that's a quote that we've used in our presentations in the past. Is
it? Okay.
That's the idea. He had this narrative vision.
If you put these things together on a spreadsheet, they don't necessarily make sense or add up, but everyone in the world was just like, yes, this is what we want.
You can find the old furniture, you can find the look and feel, you can come up with a fun and innovative name for the space, and it's usually some kind of crazy Baroque name like the old old-timey conflagratorium of blah, blah, blah. You know, it's like these ludicrous names. The drinks are comforting. The atmosphere is comforting. It's warm. It's inviting. And the food is just good, solid, hearty American tavern food. You know, nothing, he's not reinventing the wheel.
Okay, so I am working on this video now, and Martin and I probably talked about Norman Hobday for 20, 30 minutes. He is an enigmatic and fascinating figure who was kind of unwittingly the architect of the aesthetics of everyone's childhood. I mean, it's totally insane, his story. But I thought it was a bit too much of a digression for the video proper, a little too hard to explain the weirdness. So that is what I get into in this week's newsletter. If you don't know, I have a free newsletter that I run over on Patreon. It's a way for me to tell you when new videos come out and also to give you an extra article about something that I couldn't include in the video. This week it's all about Norman, who is just fascinating.
So Henry opened a second location up in the Marina District. He opened a bar called the Dartmouth Social Club. The conceit of the space was that he would only hire guys, and just guys, who had gone to Dartmouth.
The newsletter's at almost 4,000 people. I would love to break that with this video, and when you subscribe, it really helps out the channel. So yeah, go ahead and check that out if it's of interest, and otherwise, let's go ahead and get back to the video. I found this 1978 review of a TGI Fridays, and there were seeds of the next stage. I begin a running commentary on the decor, and my friend waves me into silence. She says that Fridays is a Fern bar, as though that explains everything. That is a West Coast term, she adds. There are ferns overhead. I note that Fridays is having an identity crisis. The red and white matchbooks promise the lure of a singles bar. Come prepared to meet someone new, reads the edict. At the same time, the menu offers kids' burger platters for customers under 12. I wonder if Fridays wishes to become the first pre-puberty pickup bar. So even in the 70s, as these chains began to rapidly expand, they were pondering, could singles bars somehow become a destination for kids when the parents ended up getting married? And that's exactly what happened. The modern era of chain design, it makes sense now. It is a cultural rebellion against the baby boomers. At first, I thought it was weird that the baby boomers had transformed their singles bars into places where they hung out with their kids. What kind of Freudian stuff is going on there? But then I realized there are a lot of babies at breweries. Just do a Google image search for play areas at breweries, and you will find a lot of them. This is the same type of transformation of a space that is meant for adults to one that includes children. Why do we do this? I tried to think about why I've done it in the past. I know a part of it was I just wanted a place where I could feel like a person again and not just a parent, and a brewery offered that opportunity. But I think there's a more generous reason too. I mean, part of the reason I wanted to take my kids along with me to the brewery is that it's just a space that I think is cool, because I think it happened when I was in my 20s that it really became mainstream. And I wanted to share that cool space with them. All this made me realize that this previous generation that turned Fern bars into family hangouts, they'd forgotten the sleaze and they just remembered the excitement. So when we redesign these restaurants, when we strip away their soul, we're not just losing some dusty antiques and weird picture frames on the wall. We're losing a sense of the personality of a previous generation and a reminder that they were not just parents, but people. All right, that's it for this one. Thank you for watching. Thank you to Meryl and Martin for talking to me. Two of the funnest interviews I've ever done. They were awesome, so thank you to them for that. I'm curious to know, do you think that my diagnosis is right? What details do you think we're missing here? And do you think it's a good thing that these restaurants have changed their look? And what would you propose instead? I'm curious what your thoughts are. Otherwise, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. All right, bye.